Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. That's ziprecruiter.com/zip. ziprecruiter.com/zip.
The Agile brand.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Innovation Economy podcast, where we look at what it's like to build businesses, work, and live in an innovative place, and the role of location in a hyper-connected hybrid work world. The Innovation Economy podcast series is brought to you by Arlington Economic Development, representing Arlington, Virginia, one of the most dynamic economic hubs in America, with resources for businesses from the Fortune 500 to startups and everything in between. You can learn more about them at www.arlingtoneconomicdevelopment.com. That's www.arlingtoneconomicdevelopment.com. To listen to the latest episodes or sign up for the Innovation Economy newsletter, go to innovationeconomy.show or click follow on your favorite podcast app. And now on to the show.
Individual artists may not share the same footprint of real estate as a corporate headquarters, but when it comes to distinguishing a place for its vibrancy and unique features, creatives are often relied upon to attract businesses and maintain a cool factor. I'm Susan Sirocco, Director of Creative Economy at Arlington Economic Development in Arlington, Virginia. And the role of economic development is to retain and attract businesses where workers can live and thrive in a great community, even when the work world is changing. We support small businesses through programs like BizLaunch and value the importance of placemaking and a sector devoted to creative economy and the arts. Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to be an artist in Arlington, full time, in the face of AI and everything else. And to help me discuss this, I'd like to welcome David Amoroso. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So, Amoroso art has a reputation in Arlington. You are part legacy artist, part first responder for creative projects, but you're always willing and present to represent Arlington. So, let's start with your background. When did you know you were sure about being an artist, or were there many moments?
That's always an interesting question for me because I don't think I've ever really had that mindset of now I'm an artist, or maybe I never really thought, oh, I'm going to be an artist. I think a series of fortunate experiences led up to that more than anything. I've always loved art, and as a kid, it was my favorite class. I loved photography, but I always worked a full-time job, as I got older. And so I explored creative opportunities at the same time I was working full-time. And as time went on, it just continued to grow and grow. And I'm going to say it eventually became 2 full-time jobs. And so I was glad to let the regular day job eventually go a few years back.
Well, it takes a lot of courage and fortitude to start any business, but maybe more so to be an artist. Success is a long game, and art in particular is very subjective. It may be an age-old question for artists, but what does it take to be inspired and be an artist in Arlington?
I'm glad you said long game because I think that's one of the most challenging parts of any business. You can experience some initial success maybe quite quickly, but that doesn't guarantee anything beyond that. For me, when I look back, I see some things, where I was establishing relationships and maybe non-traditional places for artists to share their work. And that's probably what made the biggest difference. My first exhibit was at a Salvadoran restaurant in Washington, El Tamarindo. And then I also began to sell work at Miss Pixie's, which was a curated vintage shop in DC. And those things, I think, inspired me to do more art. And that led me to start connecting with more people in Arlington. And I think one thing that's always been good for me as an artist in Arlington is the fact that there, maybe because it's a smaller county, people know each other and there's a lot of word of mouth. And so, I've been fortunately connected to a lot of really cool projects and opportunities with Arlington. And I think that's really helped to establish me in this area.
Yeah, I think that you have longevity in your in your in your career trajectory, but we're in an environment in an era that it's always challenging traditional approaches to expression. Are you ever tempted to abandon your brushes and canvas and get tech savvy? I mean, we are a very tech centric area. I mean, I know you've worked in other fields, so you've taken a few other areas for a test drive. But what keeps you rooted in your art?
I think I'm a hands-on person. And this sort of piggybacks off your, previous question in my mind, because, it's kind of like gardening. You got to plant those seeds and see which ones grow. And what grows this year may not grow next year. So because I'm very hands-on, that side is what makes art meaningful to me personally. So, when I think of technology and AI, it's interesting to see. And, sometimes I find it entertaining, but I think, when it comes to clients and customers or consumers, whatever we want to call them, I think people make choices how they want to spend their money. Just like, okay, do I want to go to a big chain coffee shop to buy my coffee? Or do I want to go to a local business to buy my coffee? Or do I want to buy the beans and make my own coffee? And so I think that's a big part of art. I think in Arlington, in the whole DC metro area, there are a lot of people that are truly committed to shopping local and to maybe paying a little more to buy original art. The perceived value of hands-on art, I think, is always going to be higher than that of something that's maybe computer generated.
We certainly hope so. You know, Arlington and economic development, and Biz Launch, and
Yeah.
Biz Launch has provided a big array of supports to small businesses. We have workshops, networking, and events, but we don't always get to see a lot of creative businesses stepping up for help. What do you think keeps artists and creatives from seeing themselves as businesses?
Um, Not seeing themselves as a business is exactly what will keep them from being a business, ironically. But I think that most people, or a lot of people that go into the arts, just want what they create to be enough. And I think, it's that dream we all have that, I'll be discovered. People are going to, love my work, and all the doors are magically going to open and everybody will give me everything I need to be successful. But the reality is, we really need, um, to understand both the business side of art as well as the art side. I think until you're in a crisis mode, you may not understand how important the business side is. And so many artists over the years, whether it's visual arts or music, they always sign that contract with a bad manager because they didn't know any better. And so I think for artists, the more we know about a business, or running a business, the better it is. And, Biz Launch, has provided some great opportunities for me, but I have to say that being able to talk to people that are industry experts, and maybe not about arts, but about business, or people that understand, the basics, or the, even in depth sometimes, the requirements of running a business. Being able to reach out and talk to people like that makes a huge difference. Even when we're not ready to take all the advice in that moment, at least we know what we'll need to have our business licenses, to make sure that we, set up our, Virginia sales tax accounts. So, I think as more and more small businesses grow and Biz Launch extends, out further into the community, I think word of mouth is very strong in Arlington, and maybe that's what it takes. I think last year's big fall event, including art, and a project I had been working on, and the project that you helped so much with, Susan, in the actual day of delivering it, I,
Yeah, the business and brunch. Yeah,
uh,
at the Hyatt. Yeah, that was great. You did an incredible job.
well, you did too. Because it was really a collaborative experience. I mean, everybody from Biz Launch was in on it and then helped make it run smoothly. And I think even the makers market there, you know, I think it was a signal that, hey, creatives are here, we're here to support them. And I think that was a really positive, message for the community.
I can understand that a lot of artists have traditionally relied on commissions for their work and maybe gallery sales as their sort of approach to where they were going to generate income. But what's the gallery representation like now?
I don't think I have an answer for that. And I don't even know if galleries do. For me, I've always worked backwards, like in that I'll have a concept for an exhibit I would like to do, so I begin to create work for it, and then hopefully eventually the opportunity will present itself. But I think a lot of artists are, I've been sharing their work online and bypassing galleries. So, the out for galleries, I think they really need to have a strong following and base of clients that will purchase, because galleries take their commission that impacts sales, for the artists. And I think a lot of our artists have actually just completely bypassed using galleries. I still like working with galleries. I think that um, we're not in this area. I mean, we're in the DMV, so we've got access to spaces in Maryland, Virginia, and DC, and they're all very unique. They have different draws, if you will. So, I think we're in a time of experimentation, maybe, if that's a fair statement. We may need to ask some galleries to see what they think, but it's definitely a different world for galleries these days, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure it's evolving. I also we talk a lot about in biz launch and in economic development about workforce development. And, these are the areas where we look at, well, how does the talent pipeline get um, fostered for just about any industry? I don't know if you have any stories to share about what your formal education has been in terms of the creative side, but and you've also been a full-time employee and now you're a full-time artist. So, what would you tell a young artist looking to forge a path as a full-time artist?
I think it's important that we always have a plan, or a vision. Maybe that's an even better word, a vision for what we want our business to be, but then also be very flexible and actually listen to feedback and cues that the world is giving us. Um, I think any business, it's amazing when you go out there and you have a stellar event or activity, and that that high that you get from it, you just want it to be something that happens every single time, but it's not likely that it will. My first exhibit, I think most of the work sold during the opening reception. And, that was amazing. And so I thought, okay, this is easy. And then, my next opening reception, the same people came back, but they'd already purchased something, so they didn't buy it the second time. And so I think it's always important to temper experiences a little bit, have a plan and realize that, no matter how much work you do in advance, you're always dependent on so many other factors. And so I think it's important that don't let any one experience defeat you to the point that it makes you question what you're doing or want to stop. you know and when you do have those moments, um sometimes it's hard to separate ourselves from the work we create, but I think it's important to step back and say, okay, what was different about this experience? What did I hear or see that may have impacted it this way? It may or may not be a guarantee, that the next time it'll be a success or not, but I think we always, whenever we can maintain some objectivity, I think it helps us. And so, for new artists, I hate to say don't put all your eggs in one basket because it's so cliche, but I think it's important to temper what you hear and your emotions may be tied to it. The right moment, when it comes, and we can't necessarily control that.
Do you think that it's important for young artists to have some sort of formal training or education, or are is that's because this is certainly a skill set that evolves for every artist over time, and not every artist has any kind of formal training. So, what's the role of education and training for artists these days?
I studied a bit of photography, so my background was photography. Not I'd never taken a painting class in my life, but I do think that education in photography helped me quite a bit. When I started painting, I approached it from a photographic perspective. So, much like with the camera, I would always frame things up before I took the photo. As I'm starting to work on a canvas, I sort of look at that camera, the canvas as my frame as well, and work within that. If I hadn't studied photography, um, it's a tool I wouldn't have had available to me. I think the great thing about education is, it's a tool. It's something you can use. You can either respond to it and use it maybe 100%, or your work can be a response to it in the opposite direction. I mean, formal training can be great. There's so many talented, able artists that have never studied art and have created beautiful work. I think, there are opportunities where having a more formal education actually can open more doors. So it's a mix, but I think you have to assess with yourself, what is best for you. But, even you can take so many classes these days or tutorials. So, if you're not ready for formal education in a very serious way, do that. Look at other art and see what you can learn from it yourself.
Well, you've forged quite an incredible path for your career along the way while you're in Arlington. And right now we know that, for example, that the Museum of Contemporary Art Arlington, Mocha, has invited you to be their artist in residence at their innovation studio and shop in Net Park. Well, that's high praise. And for our listening audience, the Innovation Studio shares a location in the Amazon HQ2 building, which is remarkable all on its own. So that's a very unique experience, and not one that most artists have access to. What are you hearing? I mean, this is an open space. What are you hearing from visitors to the studio?
I myself am like amazed every day at the feedback I'm hearing. And I've been aware of it, the innovation studio ever since it opened, but the response from the community is incredible. The people that are coming in are like, wow, I can't believe this opportunity exists to create. There are a lot of families that come in. Um, it's, it's an opportunity to have a little break from the real world sometimes. So it's an amazing haven, and they've got so many other things happening. I've led some workshops. Almost every day of the week, there's something new happening. On Sundays, they have outdoor events at Met Park. They have Wellness Wednesdays where they combine art with wellness. There are just so many different things that are happening. I've been, I guess, connected to Mocha via my first interactions with the Arlington Art Center, almost 20 years ago, where we were doing the Dia de los Muertos events. And, when I met Katie, Catherine Anshin, when she joined as the director, that conversation with her was just a big wow moment because she has so much vision for Mocha and is making so many things happen that, I'm just so proud to be a part of that because these things that are happening now are all things, I wanted to see, things like more community engagement and they're happening. And so, again, like you said, it is an honor and I'm thrilled to be there. And I was so happy when they called me a few months ago to invite me because I felt like, gee, I don't have a summer vacation planned. I've got a lot to do. And, being there has been like a vacation and an absolutely incredible experience.
Well, I think you've already touched on the fact that these kinds of relationships, one that you've had with Mocha for 20 plus years, it's kind of a long game, what led to that residency. And I know that you have a really good idea of the fact that talent is something that artists have to rely on, but that you shouldn't underestimate the importance of responding to messages.
It's funny you should say that because another artist friend of mine actually, is coordinating an exhibit to take place. And this morning he sent out a message, please send me your headshots. Please, I'm doing this by myself. Please. And, it's kind of crazy that I think the experience of coordinating an event or an exhibit is something all artists must do. And the earlier you do it, the better, because it lets you know what's needed and what's expected and what a difference it makes. But, I think being able to say yes or ready to say yes and being responsive is huge. Just the other day, it's been about 2 days. I heard from a spot where I had exhibited previously, last year, and I'd sent out a message in June saying, hey, if you're going to do that exhibit again this year, let me know and I'll set some work aside or create some new pieces for it. And the individual responded quickly, which I really appreciated, and said, I think, we may be working with some other artists just to mix it up this year. And I said, no problem. I completely get it. Let me know if there's a change. And then sure enough, this individual reached out to me because other artists did not respond. And I said, sure, if that's all paintings I can bring, no problem. So I think, you know, being ready to say yes, actually saying yes, I'm probably exaggerating, but I want to say at least a third of the opportunities I've had may just be because people know I will say yes and that I'm ready. And
Well, and that you show up, that showing up is a big part of what makes you really stay so connected to your community, which is pretty awesome. I think it may be your biggest talent.
I have no artistic merit, but I will be there.
Don't underestimate your merit. I mean, you have to have both. So
Yeah.
there is that.
Yeah.
So, of course, I am going to finish out here with one of my favorite questions is what's your go-to color? And what's surprising about that our audience would love to know about?
Well, if you've seen my work, you know I use a lot of color, but I'm actually colorblind. Those little dot tests that you do, I failed all three of them as a kid, and I continue to fail them many years later. So although I do see color, I don't always know what it is. I think knowing a little bit about color theory has helped. But I also fortunately have a bunch of people in my network where I can say, hey, what color is this? Or does this look good? And so I get a little help with that every now and then. And I think, for me, people ask, oh, would you ever want to get those? I think there's some virtual reality goggles you can get that's supposed to correct color blindness, but I don't think I want to know that. I don't think I ever want to try that. I think I'd be afraid what would happen because honestly, I see bright colors and they seem vivid. I guess I just don't always know what they are. So I'd be afraid to see what happens to my retinas if I put on those VR goggles.
I've often wondered if there could be binoculars for people in New England in the fall, binoculars that corrected for color blindness so people could wow with the color. But maybe that's just something that is never going to happen. Well, David, it's just been so delightful to have you as the guest today. And people listening in, you can learn more about BizLaunch and Amoroso Art in the show notes. Do you have any parting words?
No, I mean, just thank you. I appreciate that my art has been so well received, throughout the county and around here. And, please support local art and artists.
You are a gem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Innovation Economy podcast, brought to you by Arlington Economic Development. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes at innovationeconomy.show or on your podcast platform of choice. The Innovation Economy is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, let's keep innovating.
The Agile brand.